This is the final video in a 4-part video series about comma usage. In this video, we are going to look specifically at the use of commas with sentence interrupters and non-essential elements. A sentence interrupter is any word, phrase, or clause that breaks the flow of a sentence, and a non-essential element is any word, phrase, or clause that could be removed without altering the message of a sentence. First, we will look at commas with sentence interrupters. A sign you may see at an airport. 15-minute walk to gate. Make sure you have time travelers. Here, a lack of punctuation causes a possible misunderstanding. The reader may panic when they realize they had left their time-traversing friend at home. This panic would be caused due to the accidental creation of the compound noun time travelers. With rereading, we can see that the travelers are the intended recipients of the message. This is an instance of direct address, which is when a sentence contains the name of the person to whom the message is directed. The inclusion of a comma clearly directs the message to its intended recipients, and warns that all travellers should allow themselves sufficient time for the 15-minute walk to the gate. When we use direct address, we should use commas to set off the noun or noun phrase from the message. In this case, the noun appears at the end of the message, and so only one comma is required before. If the addressee appears first, include a comma after the noun or noun phrase. And if the noun or noun phrase appears in the middle of a sentence, include commas either side. Our second sentence. Susan almost missed her flight, however, because she was buying souvenirs in the duty-free store. In this sentence, we have a clear interruption to the flow of our message. The word however could be removed without altering the message, meaning that it is parenthetical. The function of however is to link this sentence to a previously established idea, meaning that it is transitional, moving from one idea to the next. Here the message of this sentence is linked to the idea of the first sentence, so we can understand that despite the warning signs, Susan almost missed her flight as she was shopping. Parenthetical expressions include words, phrases, or clauses that do not change the meaning of the original sentence. We will discuss further examples later in the video when we move on to non-essential elements. As with direct address, parenthetical and transitional expressions should be set off from the rest of the sentence using 1 or 2 commas, depending on the location within the sentence. Here, it is in the center of the sentence, so 2 commas are required. Our third sentence continues Susan's experience. Catching her flight not buying chocolate should have been her priority. Again, we have an element that interrupts the flow of the sentence. The phrase, not buying chocolate, could be removed without disruption. The effect of the phrase is to provide contrast with our message, for emphasis of the overall idea, which is that Susan was irresponsible. And again, we use commas to set off contrasting expressions from the rest of the sentence using 1 or 2 commas. To recap, direct address, parenthetical and transitional expressions, and contrasting expressions are examples of sentence interrupters which should be set off from our message using commas. Now we will look at a trickier aspect of comma usage. The uses of commas with essential and non-essential elements. We are going to look at appositives and appositive phrases, which are words or phrases that refer to the same item as another noun in the sentence. And we're going to look at adjective clauses, which offer extra information about an item identified by a noun in the sentence. Our first example. An understanding attendant Tony held the gate as Susan ran through the terminal. As with previous examples, we have a flow interrupter, something that could be removed without changing the message, a parenthetical expression. The name of the attendant, Tony, is an appositive, providing non-essential information about the noun, attendant. Appositive elements can be words or phrases that rename or provide further information about a previously introduced noun. Non-essential appositives or appositive phrases should be set off with commas. On to the next Susan-based example. Susan decided to watch the movie Troy. In this sentence, by using a comma, we have marked out Troy as a non-essential element. Non-essential elements can be removed without altering the message, but the sentence Susan decided to watch the movie is different. Some information seems to be missing. The use of the comma tells us that only one movie was available on the plane, and it was Troy. I think we can safely assume that the airline offered more than one movie on the flight, and therefore realise that the comma is misplaced. The noun phrase, the movie, is being used to introduce the title rather than be interchangeable with it. This is an example of an essential or restrictive appositive. When we use restricted appositives or appositive phrases, we do not use commas as they are essential to the message. Susan's journey continues. However, the passenger who was seated in front of Susan fully reclined her seat. In this sentence, and placed between a set of commas, we have an adjective clause, who was seated in front of Susan. It is an adjective clause as it contains a subject, the pronoun who, a verb, was seated, and modifies the main clause noun, passenger. Again, what the commas do is mark the clause as non-essential, meaning that we could understand the same message through the main clause. However, the passenger fully reclined her seat. The isolated main clause suggests that there was only one passenger on the plane. Susan, therefore, is not a passenger. And the non-essential adjective clause implies that out of all the seats on the plane, this single seat-reclining passenger decided to sit in front of Susan. I am certain that this was not the case, and so clearly the adjective clause is essential to the message. The rule for restrictive adjective clauses is the same as for essential appositives and appositive phrases. By removing the commas, the adjective clause is marked as restrictive. Its essential function is to identify which passenger out of the many passengers is the subject of the sentence. So we move on to the final entry in the saga of Susan. This made it difficult for Susan to enjoy the movie which had been recommended to her by a friend. At the end of this sentence, we have another adjective clause. This time, the pronoun is which, the verb is had been, and it modifies the main clause noun, movie. The lack of a comma marks this as essential to the sentence, meaning that the same message can be understood with or without the clause. In a similar way to the non-essential appositive, in example 4, this adjective clause is providing extra and non-essential information. By including a comma before the non-restrictive adjective clause, we clearly mark this. So, we use commas to set off non-essential appositives, appositive phrases, and adjective clauses, but we do not use commas if appositives, appositive phrases, or adjective clauses are essential to our message. A final review. Use commas to separate any sentence interrupter or non-essential element. If at the beginning of a sentence, place the comma after. If at the end, before. And if in the middle of a sentence, place commas either side. Be careful not to use commas to separate essential elements of a sentence. Thanks for watching.